My name is Olivia Carter, and I was 33 years old when my brother decided to humiliate me in front of nearly 100 wedding guests. He thought it would be funny. He thought everyone would laugh. He thought I would quietly accept it, just like I always had. What he didn't know was that the building he was getting married in belonged to me. The wedding was held at Grandview Hall, one of the most prestigious event venues in the city. Elegant chandeliers hung from the ceilings. Marble floors reflected the afternoon sunlight. Fresh roses lined the entrance. It was exactly the kind of place my brother Ethan had dreamed about. When I arrived that afternoon, I stepped out of my aging sedan and started walking toward the front entrance. I barely made it halfway before my mother intercepted me. Her smile disappeared the moment she saw me. "Olivia," she said coldly. "Mom." She glanced at my simple navy dress. Then she pointed toward the side of the building. "The service entrance is around back." I frowned. "What?" "The front entrance is for family and important guests." The words hit harder than I expected. "I'm your daughter." My mother folded her arms. "Don't make a scene today." Before I could answer, Ethan appeared. He was wearing an expensive tuxedo and carrying his phone. Perfect timing. He started recording. "Everyone," he announced dramatically, "meet my sister." Several guests looked over. Ethan laughed. She couldn't even bother dressing properly. A few people chuckled awkwardly. I felt every eye on me. Then he pointed toward the service door. "Employees use that entrance. So should you." The crowd laughed again. Not everyone, but enough. I could feel the humiliation burning inside my chest, yet I smiled. "Congratulations, Ethan." Then I walked around the building, past the dumpsters, past the loading dock, past stacks of catering supplies. Straight to the service entrance. A young staff member opened the door. Her expression was sympathetic. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It's okay. I wasn't angry, not anymore." Because this moment had been coming for months. 3 years earlier, nobody in my family cared what I did. Ethan was the golden child, the successful one, the favorite. He worked in finance, drove luxury cars, posted pictures from expensive vacations. My parents worshipped him. I worked in commercial real estate. Most of the time, my family forgot that. Whenever I talked about work, their eyes glazed over. Whenever Ethan talked about himself, everyone listened. Then everything changed. A property development deal I helped negotiate turned out the opportunity of a lifetime. Quietly, carefully, I invested. One building became three. Three became seven. Within 5 years, I owned multiple commercial properties. One of them was Grandview Hall. I purchased it 8 months before Ethan booked his wedding. He never knew. Neither did my parents. I never told them. Because I wanted to know whether they would ever value me without money. The answer arrived the moment they sent me through the service door. The ceremony was beautiful. The bride looked happy. The guests enjoyed themselves. And throughout the entire event, I sat alone at a small table near the kitchen. Not with family, not with relatives, not even with friends, just alone, exactly where they believed I belonged. Then came the reception. Dinner ended, music played, people danced, and Ethan stood up to give a speech. "My family taught me everything," he said proudly. "They taught me loyalty, respect, love." I almost laughed. Instead, I checked my watch. 7:42 p.m. Perfect. A few minutes later, the father-daughter dance began. Everyone gathered around the dance floor. Phones came out. People smiled. Then the music stopped. Confused murmurs filled the room. The venue manager walked onto the dance floor holding a tablet. His name was Daniel Brooks, and he knew exactly what he was doing. "Excuse me," he said. "I apologize for interrupting." Ethan looked annoyed. "What is this?" Daniel remained calm. "There has been a misunderstanding regarding ownership of this venue." The room fell silent. My father stepped forward. "We paid for this venue." "Actually," Daniel replied, "you rented it." Everyone stared. Daniel turned toward me. Then he raised his hand. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce the owner of Grandview Hall." Every head turned. Every phone turned. Every eye landed on me. I slowly stood. The silence was deafening. Daniel smiled politely. Miss Olivia Carter purchased Grandview Hall 8 months ago and has owned it ever since. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Ethan looked frozen. My mother's face drained of color. My father simply stared. "What?" Ethan whispered. I walked toward the dance floor, one step at a time. The room parted around me. Like a wave, I stopped beside Daniel. "Beautiful venue," I said. "I thought so too when I bought it." My mother's mouth opened. No words came out. Ethan shook his head. "That's impossible." "No," I smiled. "It isn't," Daniel continued. "Miss Carter personally approved every aspect of tonight's event." Gasps echoed around the room. I could see guests exchanging looks. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked fascinated. A few looked genuinely sorry. My brother finally found his voice. "Why didn't you tell us?" The answer came easily. "Because I wanted to see who you really were." Silence, heavy, painful silence. I looked directly at my parents. "You sent me through the service entrance." Neither of them responded. "You seated me beside the kitchen." Still nothing. "You treated me like I wasn't family." My mother started crying. Real tears. But it was too late. For years I had begged for approval. For years I had chased acceptance. For years I had tried to earn love that should have been given freely. I was done. "I don't hate you," I said quietly. "That's the truth." The room listened, every single person. I understand who you are." My father lowered his eyes. Ethan looked like he wanted to disappear. I took a slow breath. The reception will continue, several guests visibly relaxed. The food stays, the music stays, the celebration stays. Then I paused. "But after tonight, I'm done." My mother looked up. "Olivia, no." I shook my head. "No more pretending, no more excuses, no more humiliation. No more family gatherings where I was invisible. No more chasing people who never wanted to see me." The silence that followed felt endless. Then I turned around and started walking. This time through the front entrance. The same entrance they told me I wasn't worthy of using. Behind me, nobody laughed. Nobody mocked me. Nobody pointed. They simply watched. Because for the first time, they saw the truth. Not the version my family created. Not the disappointment they imagined. The real me. The woman they underestimated. The woman who owned the building. The woman who finally chose herself. And as the evening air hit my face, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not revenge. Not victory. Freedom. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't proving people wrong. It's walking away after they've already done that for you. My name is Hannah Brooks, and I was 35 years old when my parents told me I wasn't really family. They didn't say it behind closed doors. They didn't whisper it privately. They said it at my brother's wedding, in front of nearly 100 guests. And minutes later, every person in that room learned a truth my family had spent years ignoring. The wedding took place at a luxury hotel overlooking the harbor. Crystal chandeliers hung above polished marble floors. Fresh flowers filled every corner. The entire venue looked like something from a magazine. I arrived early. I always did. I believed showing up mattered, even when nobody appreciated it. As I stepped into the lobby, I saw my mother speaking with several guests. She looked elegant in a silver gown. When she noticed me approaching, her smile vanished. "Hannah, Mom." She glanced around before lowering her voice. "Try not to draw attention to yourself today." The words stung, but they weren't surprising. For years, my younger brother Tyler had been the center of everything. The favorite, the success story, the son they proudly introduced to everyone. I was simply Hannah, the daughter who was never enough, the daughter whose achievements somehow never counted. I smiled politely. "I'll stay out of the way." "Good," then she walked off. An hour later, things became worse. The photographer gathered relatives for family pictures. Parents, grandparents, cousins, aunts and uncles. Everyone was called forward. Everyone's except me. At first, I thought it was an oversight. Then I watched my father deliberately step between me and the group. "Hannah," he said quietly, "these are family photos." I stared at him. "I am family." His expression hardened. let's not do this today. The message was clear. I wasn't wanted. I stepped back, the camera flashed, and I stood alone, watching my family smile without me. That should have been the moment I left. But I stayed, because deep down, I needed closure. I needed to see whether they would ever change. The answer came during the reception. I was seated at a table near the kitchen entrance, far from the dance floor, far from the head table, far from everyone important. A place that felt less like a seat and more like a statement. I sat quietly and watched. Tyler gave speeches. My parents laughed. Guests celebrated. Nobody spoke to me for nearly an hour, and as I sat there, memories flooded back. Years of them treating me like an outsider. When I graduated college with honors, my parents skipped the ceremony because Tyler had a baseball game. When I bought my first home, they said they were too busy to visit. When I started my own consulting company, they told relatives I worked in an office. Nothing more, nothing less. They never asked questions. They never cared enough to learn. The truth was simple. They only valued success they could brag about. And Tyler made bragging easy. 3 years earlier, my consulting firm landed a major government contract. One contract became 3. 3 became 10. The company exploded. By the age of 34, I had quietly built a business worth millions. I never told my family. Not because I was hiding it. Because they never bothered asking. At 7:30 that evening, Tyler stood to give a toast. The room fell silent. He raised his glass. Tonight is about family. Guests smiled. My parents beamed. Tyler continued. Family supports you. Phil stands beside you. Family celebrates your victories. Applause erupted. Then my mother stood. She looked emotional, proud, the perfect mother. There are people who are family by blood, she said. And there are people who are truly family. Several guests nodded. Then she looked directly at me and smiled, coldly. You earn your place in a family. The room became uncomfortable. Some guests looked away, others stared. I felt every eye on me. The humiliation was deliberate, carefully planned, public. My father stepped beside her. Hannah has always chosen her own path. His voice carried across the ballroom. Sometimes people separate themselves from family. There it was. The final message, the final rejection. I wasn't really family, not to them, not anymore. The room felt smaller, heavier. I could have cried. Instead, I checked my watch. 7:42 p.m., perfect timing. A few moments later, the wedding coordinator approached the stage. She whispered something to the master of ceremonies. Confusion crossed his face, then he tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? The music stopped. Conversations ended. The room fell silent. The hotel's general manager stepped forward. His name was Robert Hayes, and he was holding a folder. My parents looked annoyed. Tyler looked confused. Robert cleared his throat. I apologize for the interruption. Nobody moved. I've been asked to make an important announcement. A murmur spread through the crowd. Robert opened the folder, then looked directly at me. Ladies and gentlemen, many of you may not know that this evening's wedding was made possible by someone sitting in this room. The silence deepened. My mother frowned. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. Robert continued. 5 years ago, when this hotel faced bankruptcy, an investor purchased a control interest and saved the property. People exchanged curious glances. The same investor has continued funding renovations, staff expansion, and community programs. Then he smiled, and that investor is Miss Hannah Brooks. The room froze completely, utterly, frozen. Every head turned toward me. My mother's face went pale. My father's mouth literally fell open. Tyler looked stunned. What? He whispered. Robert wasn't finished. Miss Brooks also personally covered a significant portion of tonight's wedding expenses after learning the family budget was struggling. Gasps filled the ballroom. Several guests stared at my parents. Others stared at me. Nobody knew what to say. Tyler stepped forward. You paid for part of the wedding? I nodded, quietly. Yes. My mother looked horrified. You never told us, I almost laughed. You never asked. Silence. Painful silence. The kind that reveals truths nobody wants to face. I stood slowly, calmly. And for the first time all evening, people actually listened. For years, I wanted your approval. My voice shook slightly, but I finally realized something. My parents watched me, speechless. No matter what I achieved, it would never be enough. The room remained still. I looked directly at them. You ignored my successes. You excluded me. You erased me. And tonight you publicly announced that I wasn't really family. My mother's eyes filled with tears. My father looked down. Tyler couldn't meet my gaze. I took a breath, then smiled sadly. The truth is, family isn't something you earn. Nobody spoke. Real family doesn't make you prove your worth. A few guests nodded. Others wiped away tears. The room understood, finally. My entire life, I had been fighting for a place at a table that was never meant for me. And suddenly I didn't want that seat anymore. I felt free, lighter, stronger. I looked around the ballroom one final time. At the guests, at my brother, at my parents. Then I walked toward the exit. Nobody stopped me. Nobody laughed. Nobody questioned my value. Because minutes after my parents publicly declared I wasn't really family, the entire room learned the truth. I had never been the disappointment. I had never been the failure. I was simply the person they never bothered to see. And that was their loss, not mine. My name is Olivia Carter. And the day my brother's wedding guests pretended not to see me was the day everything changed. Not because I caused a scene, not because I demanded attention, but because one announcement exposed a secret nobody in that room expected, including my own family. The wedding took place at Grandview Hall, one of the most exclusive venues in the city. Crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows, gardens stretching for acres, the kind of place people bragged about booking years in advance. I arrived at exactly 3:15 p.m. wearing a simple dark blue dress. Nothing flashy, nothing expensive, just elegant. The moment I stepped through the main entrance, my mother appeared. Her smile vanished immediately. "Olivia," she said coldly. "You're here, not hello? Not you look beautiful, just disappointment." Before I could respond, she grabbed my arm and guided me toward the side of the building. "What are you doing?" I asked. "The seating chart is finalized," she said. "Please don't make things awkward today." Awkward. That word followed me my entire life. My brother Ethan was the golden child, the successful one, the celebrated one, the son my parents proudly introduced at every opportunity. I was simply Olivia, the daughter who never seemed impressive enough. When we reached a service hallway near the kitchen, my mother stopped. "You'll enter from here." I stared at her. "What?" "The front entrance is for immediate family." The words hit harder than any slap. I actually thought I'd misheard. Then she said it again. "We don't want confusion with the guests." Confusion. As if I were some stranger who wandered into the wedding. As if I wasn't Ethan's sister. As if I hadn't spent 32 years carrying this family's last name. Several catering staff overheard. Their uncomfortable expressions told me everything. My humiliation was public. Intentional. Carefully planned. I looked at my mother. "You're serious?" She folded her arms. "Please don't create drama." Then she walked away. Just like that. Leaving me standing beside a service entrance. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I smiled. Not because it didn't hurt. It did. More than she would ever know. But I had spent 8 months preparing for this day, and I knew something they didn't. I entered through the service hallway exactly as instructed. The reception ballroom was breathtaking. Hundreds of guests filled the room. Soft music played. Champagne flowed. Laughter echoed beneath crystal chandeliers. And there, hidden in the farthest corner of the room, was my seat. Table 19. Behind a decorative pillar, partially blocked from the dance floor. A place where nobody would notice if I disappeared completely. I sat down quietly. Across the room, my parents occupied the head table. Ethan stood proudly beside his new wife, the center of attention, exactly where he'd always been. Sismas. The ceremony passed, dinners was served, speeches began. Not once did anyone acknowledge me, not once. Then came the family slideshow. That was when the real cruelty appeared. Photos flashed across the giant screen. Ethan as a child, Ethan graduating, Ethan winning awards, Ethan with our parents, Ethan celebrating birthdays, vacations, Christmas mornings, family milestones, picture after picture. And somehow, I wasn't in any of them. Not one. Entire years of my life had been erased. Photos where I knew I'd been standing beside them had been cropped. Others had simply disappeared. The message was clear. They weren't just ignoring me tonight. They were rewriting history, pretending I never existed. The room applauded when the slideshow ended. My mother wiped away proud tears. My father smiled. Ethan waved at the crowd, and I checked my watch, 7:42 p.m. right on schedule. A few moments later, the father-daughter dance began. Guests surrounded the dance floor. Phones lifted into the air. Everyone focused on the emotional moment. That's when the music stopped. The sudden silence confused everyone. People looked around. Whispers spread. Then the venue manager stepped onto the dance floor. His name was Daniel Brooks, a calm, professional man I'd worked with for months. He adjusted his tie and lifted a microphone. I apologize for the interruption. The ballroom fell silent. My father frowned. "This can wait." "I'm afraid it can't," Daniel replied. The room became still. Every guest watched. Every phone recorded. Daniel looked down briefly at a tablet, then spoke. "There appears to be a misunderstanding regarding tonight's event." Ethan laughed nervously. "What misunderstanding?" Daniel slowly turned toward my corner of the ballroom, toward table 19, toward me. Then he raised his hand. "Miss Olivia Carter." The room followed his gesture. Suddenly, hundreds of eyes landed on me. Confusion spread instantly. Daniel continued. "Would you please join me?" I stood. The silence grew heavier with every step I took. My mother looked pale. My father looked confused. Ethan looked irritated. None of them understood what was happening, yet. I reached the dance floor. Daniel smiled politely. Then he delivered the sentence that changed everything. "Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to formally recognize the owner of Grandview Hall." The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Daniel turned toward me. "Miss Olivia Carter purchased this property 11 months ago and has been the sole owner ever since." The reaction was immediate. Gasps, whispers, shock. Dozens of guests stared in disbelief. My mother's face lost all color. My father's mouth opened slightly. Ethan looked like he had forgotten how to speak. "What?" he whispered. Daniel continued. "Miss Carter personally approved tonight's event and covered several expenses associated with this reception." The silence became unbearable. I looked directly at my family. For the first time all evening, they were looking at me. Really looking. Not through me. Not around me. At me. Shook her head. "No, yes," I said calmly. "I own the building." My father stepped forward. "Olivia, why didn't you tell us?" I almost laughed. Because the answer was obvious. "You never asked." The words landed like stones. Nobody spoke. Nobody could. For years, I had listened to them celebrate Ethan's success. Years of comparisons. Years of dismissive comments. Years of being treated like an afterthought. Meanwhile, I'd built a technology company. Sold it, invested wisely. Purchased properties. Created businesses. Built a life, and not once had they cared enough to notice. Ethan finally found his voice. "This is ridiculous." "Is it?" I pulled out my phone. "Would you like me to show everyone the ownership records?" His expression collapsed. Because deep down he already knew. I wasn't lying. The room watched in stunned silence. Guests exchanged looks. Some seemed embarrassed. Others horrified. They had spent the evening witnessing my sister's exclusion without understanding the full story. Now they understood. And suddenly, everything looked different. The service entrance, the hidden table, the missing photographs, the deliberate humiliation, every piece fit together. My mother started crying. "Olivia, please." I looked at her. The woman who had told me I wasn't really family less than 4 hours earlier. And for the first time in my life, I felt nothing. No anger, no desperation, no need for approval, just clarity. I spent years trying to earn a place in this family, I said quietly. Tonight you showed me exactly where I stand. The room remained silent, listening, watching, remembering. I wasn't invisible because I lacked value. I looked around the ballroom, at the guests, at the chandeliers, at the building I owned, at the family who never saw me. I was invisible because some people only recognize worth when they can benefit from it. No one argued. No one could. Because everyone knew it was true. I thanked the guests for attending, told them to enjoy the rest of the evening. Then I turned and walked toward the front entrance. Not the service door, the front. The same entrance I had been told wasn't for family. Behind me, hundreds of people stood in stunned silence. My parents remained frozen. Ethan remained speechless. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel hidden. I didn't feel unwanted. I didn't feel small. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't destroying the people who underestimated you. It's letting them discover the truth when it's already too late. My name is Hannah Brooks, and the day my brother humiliated me at his wedding was supposed to be one of the happiest days of his life. Instead, it became the day everyone discovered a truth my family had ignored for years. The truth was simple. They had spent a decade looking down on the wrong person. The wedding was held at Willowcrest Manor, one of the most sought-after venues in the state. The place was breathtaking. Stone archways, perfect gardens, crystal chandeliers. A venue people waited years to book. I arrived at 2:30 that afternoon in my aging silver sedan. Nothing fancy, nothing impressive, just me. The moment I stepped out of the car, I saw my brother Ryan standing near the entrance, with several friends. He was already laughing. That should have warned me. Hannah actually came, he announced loudly. His friends turned toward me. Some smiled politely. Others looked uncomfortable. Ryan walked closer and looked me up and down. You couldn't at least rent a nicer car for the wedding? Several people laughed. I smiled politely. I've learned over the years that reacting only gives people like Ryan more entertainment. He had always been the golden child, the successful one, the charismatic one, the son my parents proudly showed off. Meanwhile, I worked quietly in software development. I didn't post about my achievements. I didn't buy luxury cars. I didn't care about appearances. To my family, that meant I wasn't successful. It meant I was boring, forgettable. Less important, Ryan pulled out his phone. Guys, look at this. He pointed the camera at me. My sister drove 3 hours to a luxury wedding in that thing. More laughter. I could feel dozens of eyes on me. Guests arriving, family members, friends, everyone watching. Then came the final insult. Ryan pointed toward the side of the building. The service entrance is around back. At first, I thought he was joking. Then I saw his smile. He wasn't. The front entrance is for family. The words hit hard, because he knew exactly what he was implying. Several guests exchanged awkward glances. Even his new wife looked uncomfortable, but nobody spoke. Nobody challenged him. I looked at my parents. My mother avoided eye contact. My father stared at the ground. Neither said a word. That silence hurt more than Ryan's joke. I nodded slowly. Okay, Ryan grinned. Glad you understand. Then he turned back toward his guests. Conversation resumed. Laughter returned. And I walked towards the service entrance exactly as instructed. Not because I accepted the humiliation. Because I knew something they didn't. Something I had kept secret for nearly a year. The service hallway led through the kitchen. Several staff members recognized me immediately. One young employee looked horrified. I'm so sorry, Ms. Brooks. I smiled. It's fine, but it wasn't fine, not really. I took my seat inside the ballroom, table 17. The furthest table from the dance floor, hidden behind a decorative column. A seat chosen very carefully. A seat designed to make me disappear. As I sat there, memories flooded back. Years of family dinners where my accomplishments were ignored. Years of hearing Ryan praised for ordinary achievements. Years of being treated like an afterthought. 3 years earlier, the software company I helped build had been acquired for nearly $600 million. My ownership shares changed my life overnight. I became financially independent before turning 35. I invested wisely, purchased commercial properties, expanded my portfolio. And 11 months before Ryan's wedding, I quietly purchased Willowcrest Manor through a holding company. Nobody in my family knew. I never told them. Mostly because they never asked about my life. Dinner began. The speeches followed. Ryan thanked everyone, my parents, his friends, his wife, his in-laws, even his college roommate. He didn't mention me once. Not once. The room applauded anyway. Then came the photo slideshow. Picture after picture filled the giant screen. Ryan's childhood, Ryan's graduation, Ryan's vacations, Ryan's achievements, family memories. Only there was one problem. I wasn't in any of them. Years of family history. Gone. Erased. As though I had never existed. Guest wiped away tears. My mother smiled proudly. Ryan basked in attention, and I checked my watch. 7:38 p.m. Perfect. A few minutes later, the father-son dance began. The ballroom lights softened. Music filled the room. Guests gathered around the dance floor. Phones appeared. Everyone focused on the emotional moment. Then the music stopped. Abruptly. Confused murmurs spread through the room. The venue manager stepped onto the dance floor holding a microphone. His name was Michael Turner, and unlike everyone else in the room, he knew exactly what was about to happen. I apologized for the interruption. The room fell silent. Ryan frowned immediately. "What is this?" Michael remained calm. "There is an important matter that requires clarification." My father looked annoyed. "This can wait." "I'm afraid it cannot." The tension grew. Every guest watched. Every phone recorded. Michael looked toward the back corner of the ballroom, toward me. Then he smiled. "Miss Hannah Brooks, would you please join me?" The room turned. Hundreds of eyes suddenly focused on my table. Ryan looked confused. My mother looked nervous. I stood slowly and walked toward the dance floor. The silence was overwhelming. You could hear glasses being set down, people whispering, trying to understand. I reached Michael's side. Then he spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, before tonight continues, I believe it's important to properly acknowledge the owner of Willowcrest Manor." The room became completely still. Ryan blinked. "What?" Michael gestured toward me. "Hannah Brooks purchased this property 11 months ago and has been the sole owner ever since." The reaction was immediate. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Guests stared. Some literally dropped their phones. My mother's face went pale. My father looked like he had forgotten how to breathe. Ryan simply froze. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The silence felt endless. Finally, Ryan laughed nervously. "Very funny." Michael didn't smile. "I assure you, sir, this is not a joke." He held up a tablet. "The ownership records are available if anyone wishes to review them." Ryan's expression collapsed. Because deep down, he knew. Nobody would make an announcement like this unless it was true. I looked around the room. At the guests. At the family members. At the people who had watched my humiliation only hours earlier. Then I spoke. "Beautiful venue, isn't it?" Nobody answered. They were too shocked. I thought so too when I bought it. My mother stepped forward. "Hannah, why didn't you tell us?" I almost laughed. The answer was painfully obvious. "When would I have told you?" Her face tightened. I continued. "You never asked about my work. You never asked about my company. You never asked about my life." The room listened carefully, every word landing harder than the last. Ryan tried to recover. "You're making this into something bigger than it is." "No." I looked directly at him. "You made it bigger when you publicly humiliated me." His face turned red. I continued. "You filmed me. You mocked my car. You sat through the service entrance. You seated me in the back corner. You erased me from family history." The ballroom remained silent, because everyone had seen it. Everyone knew it was true. For years I had wanted my family's approval, their respect, their acknowledgement. Standing there, I realized I didn't need any of it anymore. Michael quietly stepped back. The moment belonged to me now. I took a deep breath. "The reception will continue," Several guests looked relieved. The food is paid for. The bar stays open. The staff will continue serving. Then I looked at Ryan. But this is the last favor I will ever do for people who spent years pretending I wasn't worth seeing. My mother began crying. My father stared at the floor. Ryan said nothing. For once in his life, he had no audience, no clever comeback, no control, just consequences. I turned and walked toward the main entrance, the front entrance. The same entrance I had been told wasn't for family. Behind me, hundreds of guests remained frozen in stunned silence. And as I stepped outside into the evening air, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Because sometimes revenge isn't shouting. It isn't destroying someone. It isn't taking away their celebration. Sometimes revenge is much quieter. Sometimes it's simply letting people discover who you really are, after they've already revealed who they are.